A gentle question drifts toward you tonight. Have you ever wondered what the very first moments felt like for immigrants standing on a quiet dock, preparing to cross the Atlantic, while your mind slowly becomes calm and sleepy with the soft crackle of an imagined campfire? As you settle in, let me reassure you that this space is safe, slow, and designed to help your body unwind. Take a long, easy breath, let your shoulders fall, and allow the gentle rhythm of this story to carry you toward rest. And when you're ready, we'll slip together into the opening moments of their journey. Before we go further, from which country are you listening tonight? And what time is it where you are? If you enjoy peaceful history like this, you're welcome to tap the like button, subscribe, and leave a soft comment. It helps this little corner of the internet continue growing quietly, one sleepy story at a time. Imagine a dim early morning at the harbor, where mist hangs just above the water and footsteps echo gently along wooden planks. People arrive with modest bundles in hand, each one containing only what they truly needed. There is no rush, just the soft hush of travelers gathering, steadying their thoughts before stepping onto a ship that will carry them far from home. The harbor air feels cool and earthy, carrying a mix of sea salt and the faint scent of damp ropes. Families adjust their clothing, making sure nothing slips from their arms. Some speak in low voices, others simply watch the slow movement of the tide, as if the water itself is inviting them to breathe a little deeper and let go of the noise they left behind. You might feel your breath becoming slower now, matching the quiet lull of that imagined shoreline. This is your micro-anchor, a small reminder that you can let your thoughts drift peacefully whenever they want to. The story will wait for you. As passengers approach the gangplank, they walk with a careful balance of anticipation and uncertainty. The wooden boards creak under their feet, the same gentle creak you might hear in an old house late at night. Each sound feels familiar, not alarming, like a soft invitation to step into a new chapter of life. There is a calmness in the way people move, slow, thoughtful, observant. Mothers tighten blankets around their children, shielding them from the cold breeze. Older travelers pause to glance back at the distant outline of their village or town, committing it to memory one last time before the ocean becomes their companion. The ship, though large, feels like a living thing, swaying lightly as passengers settle in. Ropes tighten, sails flutter, and the faint murmur of the crew blends with the soft chorus of travelers finding their places. Everything moves with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat guiding them forward. As you listen, notice how your own rhythm begins to fall into place. A gentle reminder, it's okay if your mind drifts. This is a space made for drifting. On the deck, immigrants lean against their bundles, observing fellow travelers with quiet curiosity. Some exchange polite nods. Others look out toward the horizon, where the first hint of sunlight rests on the water. Even without words, there's a shared understanding among them. They are all stepping into the unknown. The crew moves efficiently, securing crates, adjusting sails, and preparing the vessel for its long passage. Passengers watch with a mix of awe and trust, grateful for skilled hands guiding the ship. The morning grows brighter, but still soft, like a warm blanket settling gently over the scene. A child nearby tugs at their parent's sleeve, pointing at a seabird gliding above. The simple moment eases the tension in the air, reminding everyone that even far from home, small joys still find their way into the day. It is these quiet details that shape the memory of departure. As the ship prepares to push away from the dock, travelers cling to tiny pieces of familiarity, the texture of a woven bag, the scent of a scarf, the sound of a sibling's voice. These small comforts become anchors in a world that is already shifting beneath their feet. Take a moment to notice your own sense of comfort. Your breath, your warmth, the stillness around you. This is another gentle anchor drifting your mind into rest. The final preparations come with calm focus. The crew signals to one another. Ropes are lifted. The dock slowly grows quieter. Travelers inhale deeply, as if gathering courage stitched from equal parts hope and patience. Someone whispers a soft farewell to the land behind them, a land that shaped their earliest memories. For many, the greatest challenge isn't leaving their home, it's stepping into a future they can't yet picture. But they trust that the Almighty, who provides strength and benefit through every means, will guide their journey forward. And then, with a smooth push from the tide, the ship begins to move. The dock slips away. The water widens. And the long voyage, wrapped in quiet determination, finally begins. As the shoreline slowly drifts backward, passengers gather near the railings, watching their familiar world grow smaller with every gentle pull of the tide. No one rushes. No one speaks loudly. It is a moment made of soft breathing, soft footsteps, and soft thoughts. The kind of moment that reminds you it's perfectly fine to let your eyes grow heavier as the story settles deeper into calmness. The ship cuts steadily through the water, leaving a fading trail of foam behind. Immigrants hold onto their bundles, not out of fear, but out of habit. These items are tiny threads connecting them to their past. As the breeze brushes their faces, many begin to imagine what the future might look like, not with certainty, but with a quiet, hopeful patience. A gentle reminder, in case your thoughts have wandered, you can relax even more now. Let the rhythm of the ship and the rhythm of your breathing flow together, slow and steady, like waves smoothing the sand. Some passengers shift away from the railing and settle near the center of the deck, where groups begin forming naturally. People gravitate toward those who speak their language, or those who seem friendly, or simply those standing nearby. It's a small act of community taking shape, even in a place that still feels temporary. Children wiggle with curiosity, leaning over the rails just enough to watch the water slipping past. Their parents rest hands on their shoulders, guiding them gently while still allowing them to marvel at the newness of the world around them. These subtle touches bring reassurance, grounding everyone in the present moment. As the ship moves farther from land, the sounds of the harbor fade into a soft hum, distant gulls, retreating voices, the quiet creak of wooden posts fading slowly behind. Passengers listen as these noises dissolve into the steady rhythm of waves, like the ocean whispering that the journey has truly begun. The morning light rises a little higher now, warming the deck. A few travelers remove their outer layers, folding them carefully and placing them atop their bundles. The warmth eases some of the tension in their shoulders, just as the warmth of your blanket, or the imagined warmth of a campfire, eases the tension in yours. Another little anchor for you. If your mind drifts, that's perfectly fine. This is a soft place to let go. People begin organizing their sleeping spaces, spreading blankets across wooden bunks and trying to make small corners feel familiar. Some bring out a cloth or scarf and tuck it above their beds. Others straighten their belongings methodically, grateful for something they can control in a world that now sways beneath their feet. A few older travelers sit quietly and close their eyes, not yet sleeping but allowing their thoughts to settle. They've likely seen long journeys before, and they understand the value of resting whenever the moment allows. Their calm presence subtly encourages others to slow down as well. The ship's crew walks by, offering simple instructions about meal times, water storage, and safety. Passengers listen attentively, knowing that understanding the basics will help them navigate the coming days. Even so, the instructions are delivered gently, with patience. After all, everyone aboard is adjusting to a new rhythm. Near the bow, two strangers strike up a conversation about the weather and the condition of the sea. Their voices remain low, but there is a sense of shared comfort in simply speaking to someone else. Every small connection makes the journey feel less intimidating, like threads weaving a small, temporary community. As the sun continues to rise, the ocean glistens with soft reflections. Some passengers return to the railing, unable to resist the calming pull of the horizon. The waves roll in slow, predictable patterns, almost hypnotic, encouraging the mind to loosen its grip on the day's thoughts. And here's another gentle reminder, another micro-anchor. If you notice your mind softening, your eyelids growing heavy, or your thoughts floating like drifting ships, allow it. This story doesn't need your full attention. It's here simply to keep you company. The ship curves slightly, changing direction as it finds the proper wind. Passengers sway with the movement, adjusting instinctively. Soft smiles appear, small, quiet ones, because even though this journey is long, they are beginning to find their balance. And finally, as the last view of land disappears behind a soft veil of morning haze, passengers breathe deeply. Some whisper a private farewell. Some remain silent. but all of them feel the gentle weight of the moment, a mixture of hope, courage, and calm acceptance. The kind of moment that lingers softly in memory, like a warm thought carried across a quiet sea. Stepping onto the ship for the first time felt like entering a small floating world where every sound, every movement, and every detail carried new meaning. The deck shifted beneath their feet with a slow, rolling motion that required a moment of adjustment. People paused, letting their bodies learn this new rhythm while the wooden boards creaked softly under their weight. The scent of the sea wrapped around them, salt, damp rope, and gentle wind, mixing in a way they had never quite experienced before. The ship didn't feel threatening. It felt alive, like a calm companion ready to carry them forward, and this quiet presence helped settle their thoughts. Inside the passenger area, immigrants began exploring the narrow corridors and low ceilings, guided by dim lanterns that swayed gently with the ship's movement. Rows of wooden bunks filled the space, stacked closely together in an orderly pattern. For many, these bunks would become a small piece of stability in the coming days, even if they were simple and unadorned. Travelers placed their bundles down, smoothing blankets, adjusting clothing, and quietly observing their temporary home. The soft murmurs of other passengers created a comforting background, a reminder that no one was alone on this journey. A subtle stillness spread as people settled into their surroundings, each absorbing the reality that the land behind them was no longer in sight. The gentle swaying of the ship acted almost like a cradle, soothing and repetitive. Some travelers took slow breaths, grounding themselves in the moment. Others traced their fingers along the wooden posts or ran their hands across the edges of their bunks, familiarizing themselves with the textures. These small gestures of orientation offered reassurance, helping everyone ease into the rhythm of life at sea. And if your mind drifts here, let it drift softly, just like the ship drifting across the water. The first interactions between passengers happened quietly. Soft introductions, simple questions, polite nods. People shared where they had come from, how long their journey to the port had taken, or what they hoped to find once they reached the new land. None of the conversations were dramatic or heavy, just gentle exchanges that made the atmosphere warmer. Even those who didn't speak the same language communicated through gestures or kind smiles. A shared understanding naturally formed. Everyone here was navigating uncertainty, and they would face the coming days side by side. Some travelers stepped back onto the deck for a last look at the sky before settling in. The wind carried a coolness that brushed across their faces, pulling their attention toward the open horizon. Clouds drifted slowly overhead, shaped by the same wind guiding the ship. For a moment, the immensity of the ocean ahead felt less intimidating and more like a quiet invitation to rest. The rocking of the ship blended with the whisper of waves, creating a softness in the air that encouraged the mind to loosen. And if you feel a similar release, allow yourself to sink deeper into that calm. Lanterns flickered gently as the hours stretched on, casting warm light across the wooden walls. The glow softened the angles of the room and gave the cramped space a surprisingly peaceful atmosphere. People arranged their belongings with quiet care. Some folded clothes. Others tucked personal items beside their bunks. The small act of settling in helped them claim ownership over their corner of the ship, even if only temporarily. These gestures, although simple, brought comfort to the unfamiliar surroundings, making the ship feel slightly more like a living space rather than a passing vessel. A faint hum of voices, footsteps, and distant waves created a soothing backdrop. It wasn't silence, but a soft soundscape that encouraged relaxation. Some passengers sat on the lower bunks, leaning back and letting their bodies grow heavier after the long morning. The journey ahead would be long, and conserving energy was a quiet necessity. Travelers slowed their breathing, letting the gentle motion beneath them guide their bodies into a natural rhythm. This subtle interplay of movement and sound carried a calming effect that eased their early anxieties. A gentle reminder for you, too. If you notice your attention drifting, you can simply follow that drift like a leaf floating on steady water. There is no pressure to stay focused. The story will always meet you where you are, moving at the soft pace of your breath. The crew moved through the space with practiced ease, checking ropes, adjusting beams, and occasionally giving brief instructions. They kept their voices steady and calm, which helped passengers feel more secure. Watching experienced hands move with confidence brought reassurance. Travelers did not need to understand every detail. They only needed to trust that the path forward was guided with care. This trust, even in its simplest form, added a quiet layer of comfort. Some passengers began to softly tidy the shared spaces, picking up stray cloths or shifting bundles to create more room. These small acts of cooperation helped shape a sense of community early in the trip. Even without formal roles or titles, people instinctively looked after one another. A lifted crate here, a shared nod there, simple gestures with a surprisingly soothing effect. Every bit of cooperation strengthened the shared understanding that they were all part of the same drifting world now. As the ship continued forward, the gentle sway became more familiar. What had felt strange at first now felt rhythmic, almost therapeutic. Some travelers began to enjoy the movement, finding comfort in the predictability of each rise and fall. It was as though the ocean was whispering, "Settle in. Let go. You are safe enough here." And for those listening, the whisper brought a softness to their breathing and a lightness to their thoughts. The air inside grew warmer as bodies filled the space, so a few people stepped outside again to cool down. The breeze washed over them with refreshing ease. It carried the faint scent of sea water and something else, something like possibility. When they looked out toward the horizon, the expanse of water seemed endless, yet strangely peaceful. There was no rush anywhere, no loud urgency, just distance and time, two things that gently encouraged the heart to slow down. Back inside, some talked in low voices, sharing where they would sleep or how they planned to arrange their belongings. Others simply observed the room, taking in the faces around them. The mix of ages, backgrounds, and expressions painted a quiet mosaic of humanity. Everyone carried different stories, yet all were now woven into the same chapter of this journey. This shared beginning held a subtle warmth, one that didn't need words to be felt. Another gentle anchor for you. Let your breath fall into whatever pace feels easiest. Slow, natural, unforced. The story moves with you, not ahead of you. For now, the passengers focused only on the present moment, adjusting, observing, and learning the small details of life aboard the ship. There would be challenges later, and long days to endure, but none of that demanded attention yet. This moment belonged to settling in, finding balance, and allowing calm to replace the uncertainty of departure. In this simple act of arriving, truly arriving, the journey found its quiet beginning. As the ship settled deeper into its path across open water, passengers returned to their bunks to explore the small details of their temporary living space. The wood carried a faint scent of salt and age, softened by the gentle warmth of lantern light. Every creak and groan of the beams overhead reminded them that this floating world was in constant motion, yet none of the sounds felt harsh. Instead, each one contributed to a quiet rhythm, a slow reminder that the ship moved with purpose. People ran their hands along the edges of their bunks, adjusting blankets, smoothing fabric, and creating small comforts where they could. The more they touched and arranged their surroundings, the more the unfamiliar felt manageable. A few travelers decided to walk along the narrow passageways, taking slow steps as they learned how the ship swayed. The corridors formed a maze of wooden beams, but the layout became easier to understand with every gentle turn. Travelers passed each other with soft nods, careful not to rush or disturb the calm atmosphere that had settled over everyone. Even the children moved a little slower now, lulled by the rocking motion beneath their feet. These early wanderings weren't about exploring for excitement. They were about understanding, adjusting, and finding balance in a moving world. The steady hum of the ship's hull sliding through the water created a soothing backdrop. Some travelers sat near the walls, closing their eyes to listen more closely. The sound was steady, predictable, and strangely comforting. It blended with the muffled voices of others, forming a cocoon of soft noise that encouraged the mind to settle. The atmosphere felt safe enough that people allowed themselves brief moments of stillness. A few leaned their heads back, letting the warmth of the lanterns relax the muscles in their faces. And if you feel a similar ease washing over you, allow it to linger. Above deck, the air remained cool and refreshing. Passengers who sought a moment of fresh air stepped out carefully, gripping the railing as they adjusted to the open sky. The ocean stretched endlessly outward, but the horizon was gentle rather than intimidating. Light shimmered across the water like a quiet reminder that the world was vast, yet peaceful in its own way. Travelers inhaled deeply, appreciating the clean breeze, letting it carry away some of the tension that had followed them aboard. A small group gathered near the central mast, speaking softly about the length of the journey ahead. Their voices carried a tone of calm acceptance rather than worry. Everyone understood that the days would be long, but they also knew that patience was the key to passage. The ship's measured progress across the water offered reassurance. Even slow steps still brought them closer to their destination. This shared understanding created a gentle bond between them, a sense of steady companionship. Inside once more, the lantern swayed rhythmically, casting shifting patterns of light across the walls. These patterns danced softly, giving the room a dreamlike atmosphere. Some passengers watched the glow with half-lidded eyes, letting the slow movement pull their attention inward. The interplay of shadow and light worked almost like a lullaby, not sung but shown, soft, repetitive, and soothing. Travelers eased further into rest, their thoughts becoming quieter. Another gentle anchor for you. If your mind drifts, let it wander freely. There is no need to hold onto every detail. The story wraps around you like a soft blanket, asking nothing in return. A few travelers began sharing small items, pieces of dried fruit, a spare cloth, or a bit of warm drink if they had any. These tiny gestures reflected the beginnings of trust. Sharing wasn't about necessity. It was about easing someone else's discomfort, however small. Even modest acts like these strengthened the feeling of community growing within the ship. They reminded everyone that despite the narrow space and long days ahead, kindness could expand the room in unexpected ways. Fatigue began to settle over the passengers as the hours passed. The tension of departure had finally loosened, replaced by a steady calm. Some lay down on their bunks, allowing their bodies to sink into the wooden frames. Others sat with their backs against the wall, eyes drifting shut as the ship rocked them gently. In this drifting state, thoughts slowed, breathing deepened, and the small anxieties of the day faded into soft background noise. At the far end of the room, an older traveler hummed quietly, not singing a melody but simply voicing a soft, steady hum that blended with the ship's movement. The sound had no urgency, no sharpness, just a slow, warm presence that soothed those nearby. It added another layer to the gentle soundscape of the room, creating a comforting atmosphere where rest came easily. As night crept across the sky, the lanterns dimmed slightly, their glow turning warmer and softer. Passengers shifted their blankets, making small adjustments until they felt comfortable. Some whispered final words to their companions. Others rested silently, their thoughts drifting like slow-moving clouds. The ship's motion became more familiar, more predictable, as though the vessel was settling down to rest alongside them. In the final quiet moments of the evening, the ship continued forward with steady determination. The passengers, now calmer and more grounded, allowed themselves to fully enter the rhythm of the voyage. Their surroundings might have been unfamiliar, but their bodies had learned to trust the movement beneath them. And as the night deepened, a peaceful hush settled over the ship, soft, steady, and without the need for any resolution. Morning aboard, the ship arrived not with sudden noise, but with a slow blooming of light that slipped gently through small cracks in the wooden boards. Travelers stirred at different moments, guided more by the soft rocking beneath them than by any fixed schedule. The ship created its own kind of morning, subtle, unhurried, shaped by the rhythm of the sea rather than the ticking of a clock. People rose quietly, stretching their limbs, adjusting blankets, and touching the cool wooden walls to steady themselves. The air carried a faint chill, yet it held a peaceful stillness. The gentle creaking of the hull replaced the familiar sounds of home, reminding them that this new world followed a different pace. If your thoughts feel slower here too, that's perfectly welcome. Some passengers began washing their faces with cold water stored in metal containers, flinching slightly at the sharp freshness. The coolness woke their senses without rushing them, helping them transition into the day at the ship's natural rhythm. Others brushed their hair or smoothed their clothing while seated on their bunks, moving deliberately so they didn't disturb those still resting. Small routines began forming, tiny rituals that gave structure to a space where time stretched loosely. These simple acts held quiet comfort. Even in unfamiliar surroundings, the ability to care for oneself remained steady and grounding. Near the center of the room, the first soft murmurs of conversation started drifting through the air. People exchanged calm greetings, asking how their neighbors had slept or commenting on how the ship moved less during the night. The voices carried no urgency, only gentle warmth. These soft interactions made the shared space feel more welcoming, like a cozy corner where strangers slowly became companions. A few travelers smiled as they stretched, relieved to feel more balanced than the day before. The slow forming of these connections helped anchor the morning in peace. As more people woke, the subtle scent of stored grains and warm water drifted from the cooking area. Breakfast would be simple, but still a moment everyone looked forward to. The idea of a shared meal offered a sense of normalcy, a pause where the entire group would breathe and settle together. Passengers lined up slowly, forming a quiet pattern along the corridor. Children clung to their parents, still sleepy but curious about the day ahead. The shuffle of feet and the soft clatter of metal bowls created a gently comforting backdrop to the morning. Travelers received their portions one by one: warm porridge, firm bread softened slightly with steam, maybe a bit of dried fruit if supplies allowed. These foods weren't chosen for flavor but for durability, yet in the quiet of the morning, they felt comforting. People ate at their own pace, holding their bowls close, savoring the warmth. Some sat near their bunks, others found small corners where they could sit in peaceful silence. The meal created a shared rhythm, grounding everyone with familiar motions: lift, eat, breathe, rest. If your own breathing mirrors that rhythm, let it settle gently. After breakfast, passengers began their first tasks of the day. Some folded blankets and straightened the sleeping area, a simple effort to keep the space tidy and calm. Others carried small items to storage corners or helped children find something to occupy their hands. The routine wasn't assigned. People simply performed the acts that kept the environment comfortable. A quiet cooperation emerged, shaped not by instruction but by mutual understanding. The space felt more like a moving home with every passing minute. A few passengers made their way back up to the main deck, stepping into the brightness of the new day. The cool morning air brushed against their faces, refreshing and clear. The ocean stretched endlessly around them, its surface shimmering softly under the early light. Some leaned on the railing, allowing the breeze to carry away the last remnants of sleep. The sound of the waves created a soothing constant, helping their minds reset. For those listening, the ocean's rhythm was like a slow exhale. Below deck, travelers who stayed behind found comfort in the slower pace. Some sat on their bunks, hands folded loosely in their laps, enjoying a quiet moment. Others spoke softly with companions, their conversations drifting into gentle reflections about previous days or the small wonders of the morning. A sense of shared calm settled across the room. The ship itself contributed to the atmosphere. Every sway, every soft groan of wood allowed the mind to soften and the body to sink deeper into ease. A gentle reminder for you: if you feel your attention drifting like a slow boat on calm water, let it drift. There is nothing here that demands sharp focus. The story unfolds softly, moving at the same steady rhythm as your breath. The crew worked above and below deck with practiced steps, maintaining the ship with fluid motion. Their footsteps were firm yet quiet, blending seamlessly into the ship's natural soundscape. Passengers watched from a distance, feeling reassured by their steady presence. These were hands familiar with wind, waves, and the delicate balance of life at sea. Their calm efficiency made the entire space feel safer, as though the journey had a guiding structure beneath its quiet surface. As the morning continued, passengers found small tasks to fill the time: mending loose threads on clothing, adjusting the knots securing their bundles, or brushing dust from the corners of their bunks. None of the tasks were urgent. They were simply gentle ways to keep hands busy while minds remained calm. Even these small movements carried a soothing quality, grounding each traveler in the present moment. Some passengers gathered in small clusters, sharing a bit more conversation now that their bodies had fully awakened. They exchanged stories of early childhood, familiar foods from home, or the landscapes they had once lived near. Their voices remained low, but warm. These conversations weren't filled with big plans or grand hopes, just soft pieces of memory shared like passing sunlight. The act of sharing made the space feel more human, more connected. The sway of the ship grew steadier as the sun rose higher. Travelers began to recognize the rhythm of the movement, the rise, the gentle tilt, the return. In learning this pattern, their bodies relaxed even deeper. What had felt unfamiliar now felt predictable, almost comforting. The ship's motion carried a quiet lull, a slow rocking that could ease the mind into a peaceful drift. If you feel that same softness, allow it to deepen. Near the open hatchway, a few passengers watched beams of sunlight spill inside, creating warm patterns across the deck. Dust particles floated lazily through the golden light, turning the air into something almost dreamlike. The sight drew faint smiles from those who noticed, offering a subtle reminder that beauty could be found even in the simplest corners of the journey. The morning eventually settled into its gentle rhythm. No rush, no rigid structure, just a flow shaped by the sea and by the quiet cooperation of everyone aboard. Tasks faded into stillness. Voices softened. The ship continued its calm path over the water, carrying travelers toward a distant future one quiet moment at a time. As the day unfolded, passengers continued adapting to the subtle shifts in the ship's movement. Some returned to the deck for fresh air, their steps slow and steady, while others remained below to rest. The environment created its own calm rhythm, where no moment required rushing. Travelers learned to let the day stretch out naturally, allowing the ocean's pace to guide their energy. Those standing near the railing watched small ripples dance along the surface of the sea, mesmerized by how effortlessly the water moved. The gentle breeze brushed against their faces, cooling their skin and easing their thoughts. Every passing moment seemed to invite the body to soften a little more, settling into the unhurried flow of life at sea. Inside, the atmosphere held a warm quiet. Shadows shifted softly along the wooden walls as the light changed, creating patterns that drifted like slow-moving clouds. Some passengers sat quietly, hands folded, simply observing the stillness around them. Others engaged in quiet activities, sorting through belongings, tying small knots, or adjusting worn edges of clothing. These modest tasks offered comfort, providing a sense of purpose without demanding effort. A subdued harmony filled the room, shaped by the ship's movement and the quiet cooperation of its passengers. The consistency of the space gently encouraged minds to drift toward ease. A gentle reminder for you, too. If your attention melts into the background, let it. There's no expectation here, only calm. Later in the afternoon, a soft murmur of conversation began weaving through the room. Passengers shared simple thoughts about the weather, the calmness of the sea, or memories from earlier in life. Their voices remained low, respectful of the tranquility that had settled in. No one spoke of grand ambitions or heavy burdens. Instead, they exchanged small glimpses of familiarity, favorite foods, quiet habits, or the routines they once followed at home. These humble conversations wove a delicate sense of community, helping strangers feel a little less like strangers. On the deck above, the sun warmed the wooden planks, inviting a few travelers to sit along the edge. They watched the gentle curve of the horizon, noticing how the sky blended seamlessly into the sea. Birds occasionally circled overhead, gliding effortlessly before disappearing into the distance. The steady movement of the waves reminded passengers that even without seeing land, they were always moving forward. The ship rocked in its soothing pattern, giving the body a rhythm to follow, a natural lull that eased tension. As the afternoon deepened, the ship's interior felt softer, warmer. People rested in comfortable silence, blinking slowly, allowing thoughts to drift without direction. Some leaned against the edges of their bunks, letting their heads rest while the ship cradled them in its gentle sway. Others lay down for brief naps, trusting the vessel's steady motion to keep them calm. The quietness felt like a soft blanket, present, comforting, and effortless. Another small anchor for you. Breathe gently, without forcing anything. Let the story drift around you like a calm tide. Near evening, the light dimmed slightly, and the lanterns began to glow again. Their warm flicker softened the atmosphere even more, blending seamlessly with the ship's restful rhythm. Passengers moved with less effort now, as though their bodies had fully attuned to the motion beneath them. The day had unwound slowly, guiding them into a peaceful familiarity with their surroundings. Travelers no longer felt like newcomers on an uncertain voyage. They felt like part of a quiet floating world that supported them gently. In these final moments of the day's rhythm, a sense of acceptance settled across the ship. The long journey ahead didn't feel as daunting as it once did. The routines, the stillness, the shared quiet, they created a structure that soothed the heart. As the ship continued forward, carried by the guidance of the Almighty through the motion of wind and waves, passengers allowed themselves to rest deeper. The horizon softened, the sounds diffused, and the day eased into a tender, unhurried calm. The long hours aboard the ship unfolded with a quiet slowness that invited travelers to breathe more gently. Time did not move in sharp steps. It drifted like a soft tide, rising and falling without urgency. Passengers found themselves watching simple things: the sway of a lantern, the shifting of shadows, the distant ripple of waves brushing against the hull. These small details filled the stillness with a subtle comfort. People learned that there was no need to hurry. Nothing required immediate attention. The ocean set the pace, and everyone followed its calm rhythm. If you feel your thoughts slowing in the same way, that is perfectly welcome. Some travelers spent their hours repairing worn clothing or tightening the stitching on their bags. Their hands moved with quiet patience, guided by repetition rather than precision. The ship's gentle rocking helped settle their focus, turning each small task into a soothing ritual. A few passengers shared tools or offered tips in soft voices, creating moments of quiet cooperation. Even those who worked silently found these repetitive motions helpful. They anchored the mind, keeping it comfortably occupied without strain. The slow rhythm of their movements matched the slow rhythm of the sea. Children tried to entertain themselves with simple games. Small pieces of wood, fabric scraps, or imaginary stories whispered to one another. Their laughter was soft and restrained, shaped by the gentle environment around them. Parents watched with warm eyes, relieved that their children found comfort despite the cramped space. The games were simple, but they brought a sense of normalcy to the voyage. These moments reminded passengers that even on a long journey, small joys still found their way into the day, easing the heaviness of travel and brightening the quiet hours. Throughout the ship, some passengers preferred to sit alone, their gaze resting on nothing in particular. They let their thoughts drift, unhurried and free, like leaves floating across calm water. This stillness was not loneliness. It was a necessary pause after weeks of movement, planning, and farewells. The ship offered them the rare chance to simply be. The creaking wood, the distant splash of waves, and the muted footsteps of others blended into a soothing background. Their breathing slowed, matching the rhythm around them. A gentle reminder: if your attention drifts the same way, let it drift without pulling it back. That drifting is part of the rest. Some passengers found comfort in storytelling. They gathered in small groups, exchanging quiet tales of their hometowns, childhood memories, or humorous moments from their travels. The stories carried no urgency. They were shared slowly, with pauses as long as sentences. Laughter came softly, warming the air without disturbing the tranquility. These gentle conversations strengthened the sense of companionship among travelers. Even without knowing each other's full histories, they built a small community stitched together by shared patience. Others chose to simply observe the shifting weather. When the ship tilted slightly to one side, or when a darker cloud rolled above, passengers rested their hands on nearby beams to steady themselves. The wind carried hints of changing temperatures, brushing past their faces in cool or warm currents. Watching the sky became a calming habit, a way to measure time without counting hours. The open horizon offered reassurance. It stayed steady, unchanged in its vastness, reminding everyone that the journey moved forward even when nothing seemed to change. Below deck, the warmth grew softer as passengers settled into their routines. A few lit small oil lamps to brighten the corners while mending belongings. Others sat near the center, stretching their legs or adjusting their blankets. The atmosphere felt like a quiet afternoon spent indoors, where tasks had no deadlines and movement came only when it felt necessary. Travelers grew more comfortable with the slow pace, letting the hours melt gently rather than resisting them. Some passengers took short walks along the narrow corridors, letting their bodies adjust to the ship's rhythm. These walks were not energetic. They were slow, deliberate, and steady. Each step became a way of reclaiming a sense of balance. As they moved, they passed familiar faces and exchanged polite nods. These small gestures helped create a sense of continuity, even in a space where everything swayed. Above deck, the sunlight softened into a warm glow, shimmering across the water. A few travelers stood quietly, letting the golden light rest on their skin. The breeze, gentle and clean, felt refreshing after the cramped air below. The color of the sea shifted subtly throughout the day, offering new shades of blue and green to rest their eyes upon. The ocean, though vast, felt peaceful, like a moving canvas soothing the senses. Another small anchor for you. Breathe in gently, breathe out slowly. Let the calm expand as naturally as the sea stretching in every direction. As the long hours passed, people discovered the value of simply resting without purpose. Some lay back in their bunks, letting the ship's gentle sway guide them into a quiet state between wakefulness and sleep. Others sat with hands folded, eyes half closed, listening to the soft rhythms around them. Time seemed to stretch in comfortable ways, wrapping them in slow-moving tranquility. Even those who felt uneasy at the start of the journey began to settle. The unfamiliar creaks of the ship blended into familiar patterns. The rocking, once disorienting, became soothing. Travelers who had clung tightly to their belongings now rested more freely, trusting the rhythm that carried them forward. Every small adjustment brought them closer to calm. In the center of the room, a few travelers shared soft stories of their families, describing traditions, seasons, and everyday life from their villages. These were not grand tales. They were gentle glimpses of ordinary moments, grounding memories that drew smiles or thoughtful silence. Sharing these moments made the hours feel meaningful, even if nothing urgent waited ahead. As the afternoon stretched further, the ship continued its patient drift across the open sea. The passengers, embraced by the rhythm of the waves, allowed themselves to rest deeply in the slow passage of time. The long hours no longer felt long. They felt soft, like a quiet pause placed gently in the middle of their lives. As the ship settled deeper into the afternoon, many passengers found themselves drawn once again to the open deck. The horizon stretched quietly in every direction, an unbroken line where the sky met the sea with gentle certainty. Travelers leaned against the railings, resting their arms while watching the slow roll of the waves below. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded attention. The world moved at a pace set by wind and water, steady and soft. Standing there, some passengers felt the weight in their chests ease, as though the open air gently unknotted the tension they didn't realize they carried. Below deck, the warm glow of lanterns softened the tight space, turning shadows into comforting shapes rather than harsh edges. A few passengers organized their belongings with patient care, folding fabric or securing loose straps. Others rested against the walls, closing their eyes while letting the hum of the ship become a quiet lullaby. The steady creaking, once strange, had become a companion, predictable, gentle, calming. Travelers breathed in unison with the ship's rhythm, allowing the slow hours to pass without resistance. Another soft reminder: it's perfectly fine if your attention drifts. The story will carry you gently, no matter where your thoughts wander. In one corner, a small group continued mending items, patching a sleeve, stitching a tear, reinforcing the seam of a travel bag. Their hands moved with practiced slowness, guided by the simple comfort of repetition. These tasks didn't require intensity. They required patience, which the long hours provided in abundance. The soft conversation that drifted between them created a warm, familiar atmosphere, like neighbors helping one another on a quiet afternoon back home. A few travelers began humming softly, not loud enough to disturb, but just enough to add a gentle layer to the calm. The sound mixed with the sway of the ship, forming a soothing blend that encouraged relaxation. Even those who weren't part of the humming felt its effect, an easing of the mind, a loosening of tension. The room felt like a small community sharing the same peaceful breath. As the hours continued, some passengers simply lay back and watched the lantern light flicker overhead. The shifting glow formed small patterns that drifted across the wooden beams, hypnotic in their simplicity. Observing these slow changes had a way of quieting thoughts, drawing attention to the present moment without effort. Watching light move became a kind of meditation, soft, unhurried, and grounding. Others gathered near the stairway leading to the deck, drawn to the faint sounds of wind and waves. They didn't speak much. They simply sat together, comfortable in shared silence. The presence of others was enough to create a feeling of safety. Even without conversation, the closeness offered reassurance that no one was walking this journey alone. Another gentle anchor. Breathe softly. Let each breath fall like a small wave, rising and settling without pressure. Eventually, the mood aboard the ship deepened into a quiet stillness. The long hours no longer felt empty. They felt restful, almost tender. Passengers accepted that time at sea flowed differently. Without constant tasks or noise, the day became a slow drift. A chance to think or not think. A chance to rest or simply exist in peaceful awareness. The ship's movement carried them gently, guided by the will of the Almighty through the motion of wind and tide. By the later hours of the afternoon, the calm had settled into every corner. Travelers grew more at ease with themselves, with each other, and with the journey ahead. The long hours had shaped a shared rhythm, steady, quiet, and deeply soothing. And as the ship continued across the vast ocean, the passengers felt wrapped in a sense of peaceful continuity, as though the day itself offered a soft hand to guide them forward. The first hints of rough weather often revealed themselves subtly: a shift in the wind, a deeper groan from the wooden beams, a gentle but noticeable change in the ship's rhythm. Passengers would pause, holding onto nearby posts or railings as they felt the vessel tilt slightly under their feet. These early signs didn't stir panic. They simply reminded everyone that the sea had its own temperament. The sky might darken shade, or the waves might rise just enough to create a firmer lift beneath the hull. Even so, the atmosphere remained quiet. Travelers watched these changes with a cautious calm, understanding that the ocean's mood shifted naturally throughout the voyage. As the swells grew larger, the ship's motion became more pronounced, rising and falling in long, sweeping arcs. Some passengers steadied themselves by widening their stance or gripping the edges of their bunks. Others sat down, letting the movement carry them rather than resisting it. The sound of waves slapping against the hull deepened, becoming a slow, rhythmic thud that echoed through the wooden frame. The ship's creaking changed too, turning sharper in some places and softer in others. Despite these unfamiliar sounds, there was a comfort in knowing that the vessel was built to endure such conditions. Inside the sleeping area, lanterns swung in wider arcs, casting moving shadows along the walls. The flickering light made the room feel alive, as if the shadows themselves swayed with the waves. Passengers watched the pattern shift, grounding themselves in the familiar glow. Some children curled closer to their parents, sensing the change in atmosphere but staying calm in the presence of steady arms around them. Even the simplest comfort, touch, warmth, closeness, helped ease the tension of the rising sea. A gentle reminder for you, too: if you feel your thoughts beginning to sway like the lantern light, let them. The rhythm of the sea isn't something to resist. Above deck, the air grew sharper as the wind strengthened. A few passengers ventured out, careful with every step. The crew moved with practiced precision, pulling ropes, adjusting sails, tightening lines. Their actions weren't rushed. They flowed with calm coordination. Travelers watched in quiet admiration, reassured by the confident movements that kept the ship stable. Clouds thickened overhead, casting a muted tone across the water, but the view remained strangely calming. The vastness of the ocean, even when restless, held a quiet beauty. Inside, some passengers lay down to conserve their energy. Seasickness touched a few of them, creating waves of discomfort. They closed their eyes, breathing slowly, trusting that rest and patience would help. Nearby passengers offered small gestures, passing water, adjusting blankets, offering a steadying hand during a heavier tilt. These small acts of compassion created warmth in the midst of the storm's tension. As the ship moved through deeper swells, the rocking became more intense, but still rhythmic. The rise felt like a slow lift toward the sky. The fall felt like a glide back toward the sea. Passengers who listened closely found a symmetry in the motion, a predictable pattern that helped calm the nerves. The sea might have been unsettled, but its movements were steady in their own way, steady enough to follow with breath and thought. Some travelers sat with their backs against the walls, eyes half closed, focusing on the soundscape around them. The mixture of wind, wood, and water created a leadhum that filled the space without overwhelming it. By letting their minds rest on these sounds, they found a surprising tranquility amidst the unpredictability. Focus softened. Breathing slowed. The tension eased. Another small anchor. Slow inhale, soft exhale. Let the movement of the story match the movement of your breath. As the day stretched on, passengers learned to adapt more easily. They adjusted their steps automatically, leaning gently with each shift of the ship. Conversations grew quieter, but not out of fear, just out of respect for the moment. The sea demanded attention through presence rather than noise. Travelers exchanged understanding glances, acknowledging silently that this was part of the natural rhythm of life at sea. As the weather deepened into its restless mood, the ship adjusted with a steady resilience, rising and falling like a slow breath. Passengers near the railings watched the waves lift into tall curves that folded gently back into the sea. Though the sight carried a touch of awe, it did not fill them with fear. Instead, it reminded them of the ocean's vast strength, something only the Almighty could command. The wind threaded through their clothing, cool and insistent, but the motion of the ship felt stable beneath their feet. They learned to bend with each shift, trusting the vessel's structure and the practiced hands guiding it. Below deck, the lanterns flickered more rapidly as the ship swayed, their light stretching into long, trembling lines across the wooden walls. Some passengers lay with blankets tucked tightly around their shoulders, choosing stillness to steady their bodies. Others sat upright, knees drawn close, listening to the deeper groans of the hull. The sounds weren't alarming. They were simply reminders of the ship's effort to push through stronger waters. Children rested their heads on parents' laps, soothed by gentle hands brushing through their hair. The closeness created warmth, turning the rough weather into something shared and softened. Another soft anchor for you. Allow your breath to loosen. Let tension drop slowly, the way a wave settles after breaking. A few travelers tried to distract themselves with small tasks, tying the corner of a blanket, sorting items in a bag, smoothing wrinkles from worn clothing. Their efforts weren't urgent. They simply gave the mind something gentle to hold on to. These tiny movements created a quiet rhythm inside the larger rhythm of the storm. Others found comfort in quiet conversation, speaking of ordinary things, the color of the sea earlier that morning, or the meals they remembered from home. These small exchanges helped pass the time, giving shape to hours that might otherwise feel heavy. Above deck, the crew continued their work with calm determination. They braced themselves as the ship tilted, pulling ropes that snapped taut in the wind. Travelers who watched from a distance noticed the quiet coordination, the way each movement complemented the next. The orderliness of their actions formed a reassuring contrast to the restless sea. Even in stronger winds, the ship felt guided with deliberate care, never rushed or chaotic. The crew's presence became another anchor of calm for the passengers below. Inside once more, the atmosphere shifted toward a deeper stillness. The storm outside continued, but the room felt warmer, quieter, a shelter carved into the heart of the ship. Passengers breathed together in low, steady rhythms, accepting the uncertainty of the waves and letting go of the need to control anything. A few whispered comforting words to their companions. Others simply closed their eyes, allowing the rocking motion to lull them into a haze between wakefulness and sleep. A gentle reminder, if your thoughts feel heavy, let them soften. You don't need to hold on to them tightly. As the late hours pressed on, the storm began to ease. The waves softened, the wind loosened, and the ship's motion became less abrupt. Passengers felt the change even before they heard it, the return of a gentler rhythm beneath their bodies. Relief washed through the room quietly, expressed in small exhales and the relaxing of rigid shoulders. The hardest part had passed. By the time the sky began to lighten again, calm had returned to the sea. The ship glided forward with renewed steadiness, carrying its passengers toward quieter days. Though the storm had challenged them, it also brought a deeper sense of togetherness, a shared resilience shaped by patience and trust. Wrapped in the softened silence of the fading waves, everyone settled into a peaceful, grateful stillness. In the calm that followed the storm, passengers gradually returned to the gentle routines of ship life. The atmosphere felt noticeably warmer, softened by shared experience, strengthened by the quiet understanding that everyone had endured the same long night. As morning light filtered through the wooden beams, travelers greeted one another with small nods, subtle smiles, and the kind of soft acknowledgement that grows only when people face challenges together. The ship resumed its steady rhythm, no longer rising sharply with the waves but gliding with a smooth, reassuring motion. This shift in energy opened the space for connection to bloom in calm, unhurried ways. People gathered in small groups, drawn naturally toward one another after the tension had eased. Conversations unfolded slowly across the deck and below, beginning with simple topics: how each person slept, whether the rocking felt gentler now, or how far the ship might travel by midday. These weren't dramatic exchanges. They were quiet steps toward companionship. Travelers listened with genuine interest, their voices low and warm, creating an atmosphere that felt surprisingly comforting for such a crowded space. The social world onboard wasn't loud or lively. It was soft, woven from patience and shared presence. Some passengers took the opportunity to offer small gestures of kindness. A bit of dried fruit was shared. A blanket was repositioned for someone who looked cold. Someone helped an older traveler steady themselves while walking along the gently swaying deck. These actions were small, but each carried a warm sincerity. Even without formal words, travelers began to build a community through simple acts of consideration. The cramped quarters no longer felt quite so tight. The air seemed lighter now that people recognized one another as companions, not strangers. A gentle reminder for you as well: if your thoughts wander, let them wander softly. You're allowed to drift here. Children resumed their quiet play, using scraps of cloth or small pieces of rope as toys. Their laughter, still gentle and controlled, brought warmth to the deck. The playfulness of their movements added a sense of ease to the environment, as though the ship itself relaxed with them. Parents watched with tired but relieved expressions, grateful that the calm had returned. The children's presence reminded everyone that even in uncertain settings, life continued with simple joys and curious moments. As hours drifted by, passengers shared pieces of their stories, fragments of home life, memories of familiar landscapes, or the reasons they embarked on such a long journey. These conversations were tender, exchanged with a kind of emotional caution, but they brought comfort. People spoke at their own pace, stopping when emotions tightened, continuing when the moment allowed. The ship's gentle rocking created a soothing backdrop, making it easier for passengers to open up without feeling rushed or exposed. Some groups settled along the edges of the deck, enjoying the way sunlight warmed the wooden planks. They watched the sea glisten, observed distant birds following the ship's path, or focused on the horizon's soft, endless line. The simplicity of these shared observations created a quiet unity. Not every moment needed words. Sometimes the companionship of shared silence brought the deepest sense of connection. Below deck, travelers gathered near lanterns that cast warm, golden circles on the floor. They sat in calm clusters, speaking in low tones while working on small tasks, sorting bundles, mending fabric, braiding loose rope. The tasks themselves were almost secondary. What mattered was the presence of gentle voices and steady hands. Each group formed its own pocket of warmth in the dimly lit room. Another anchor for you. Take a slow breath. Let it settle. Let your thoughts float like small boats moving with an easy tide. Across the ship, companionship took on different shapes. Some people found comfort in long, thoughtful conversations. Others preferred soft, momentary interactions. A nod, a shared glance, a small smile of understanding. The The ship's limited space meant no one was ever far from another person, but rather than becoming overwhelming, this closeness created a woven fabric of quiet connection. Everyone contributed to it, simply by being present, simply by sharing the journey. The quiet hum of the ship blended seamlessly with this growing sense of community. The creaking wood, the rhythmic slap of waves, and the gentle vibrations beneath the floorboards formed a steady soundtrack. These sounds reminded passengers of the movement carrying them forward, linking each moment of connection with the larger journey. The social world Onboard wasn't built through loud gatherings or celebrations. It was shaped through subtle gestures, shared routines, and a collective willingness to move gently together through each passing hour. As midday approached, the ship's gentle movement created a natural lull that encouraged people to slow down even further. Some passengers found shaded spots along the deck where they could sit quietly beside others, simply appreciating the shared calm. The warmth of the sun mixed with the coolness of the sea breeze, creating a soothing balance. In this peaceful setting, casual conversations emerged. Soft comments about the weather, reflections on how the sea looked different each day, or quiet hopes for the journey ahead. Nothing was hurried. Each sentence flowed at a pace shaped by the ocean's rhythm. The atmosphere felt safe enough that even introverted travelers found themselves speaking more than usual, their voices blending effortlessly with the soft sounds around them. Below deck, a small circle of travelers gathered near a lantern that swayed gently overhead. They shared stories, not dramatic tales, but small, tender memories from home. Someone described the scent of rain hitting dry soil. Another spoke of a quiet river near their village. Someone else recalled the taste of a warm meal shared with family. These weren't stories meant to impress. They were pieces of familiarity, offered gently as a way of weaving comfort into the unfamiliar space. The listeners nodded slowly, sometimes smiling, sometimes growing thoughtful. Each memory added a layer of warmth to the dimly lit room. Another gentle anchor for you. Allow your shoulders to loosen, just a little. Let the slow rhythm of the scene settle deeper into your breath. In another corner, friendships began forming through small acts of cooperation. A traveler offered to help someone fold a blanket more neatly. Another showed a newcomer an easier way to secure their belongings so they wouldn't slide during the ship's movement. These gestures took only moments, yet they carried surprising emotional weight. Helping one another made the long journey feel less solitary. Even those who preferred to keep to themselves found comfort in seeing kindness bloom around them, softening the edges of uncertainty. As the afternoon wore on, more passengers gathered near the railings, drawn by the shimmering water. They watched the waves roll in slow patterns, each one forming and dissolving in a way that felt predictable and calming. A few people pointed out distant birds circling overhead or commented quietly on how the sunlight danced across the surface of the sea. These small observations served as gentle reminders that even in the middle of a vast ocean, there was beauty unfolding moment by moment. Inside, the atmosphere shifted toward a more restful tone. Some passengers closed their eyes, listening to the distant conversations that floated through the room. Others rested their heads against wooden posts, letting the ship's motion cradle them into a light, peaceful haze. The room felt woven from shared fatigue and shared comfort, a space where no one needed to stay fully alert. The community that had formed through simple interactions now held everyone in a quiet, collective ease. Another soft reminder: if your mind floats away, let it. You don't need to hold onto every word. The story is here simply to guide you gently. By the time the light began to soften again, the social connections on board had settled into a natural rhythm, unforced, steady, and quietly supportive. Everyone understood, without speaking it aloud, that these bonds would carry them through many more days of the journey. Even the simplest interactions, a shared glance, a nod of acknowledgement, a moment of shared silence, became threads that strengthened the woven fabric of life aboard. And as the ship continued gliding across the open sea, the passengers felt held not only by the vessel beneath them, but by one another, moving gently together through every passing hour. Meals aboard the ship were simple, predictable, and gently woven into the flow of each day. Passengers began to recognize the subtle shift in atmosphere when mealtime approached, the faint warmth rising from the cooking area, the soft clatter of metal pots, and the comforting murmur of travelers preparing to line up. Even before food reached their hands, the routine itself brought steadiness. With so few structured moments on the ship, these quiet rituals served as anchors, offering everyone a pause to reset. The scent of warm grains or boiled vegetables drifted through the narrow corridors, not strong, but familiar enough to coax weary travelers into a softer mood. In these moments, hunger blended with comfort, turning the simple act of eating into something grounding. When passengers received their portions, often a ladle of porridge, a piece of firm bread, or a handful of dried fruit, they cradled their bowls with both hands, letting the warmth seep into their palms. Meals were never extravagant, yet they carried a sense of reassurance. Nourishment had arrived, and bodies could rest a little easier. Some people sat in small clusters, eating slowly without feeling rushed. Others found quiet corners, savoring each bite while listening to the soft background of conversations and ship sounds. The predictability of the food became part of the journey's gentle rhythm, something reliable in a world that moved constantly beneath their feet. Below deck, the atmosphere during mealtimes held a soft hum of activity. Bowls scraped lightly, spoons tapped gently, and voices blended in a warm, low tone. The crowding did not feel overwhelming. Rather, it created a shared experience that brought people closer. Children ate beside their parents, chewing thoughtfully as the ship rocked. Older travelers took small bites, pausing to rest their hands or adjust their blankets. Every movement reflected a collective acceptance of simplicity. No one expected variety or luxury, only a meal that could sustain them through another stretch of the voyage. A gentle reminder for you: if your breathing has slowed, let it continue. You're allowed to rest with the same softness these moments carry. After eating, passengers often spent time caring for their utensils and storing leftover crumbs to avoid attracting pests. These tasks were not complex, but they connected everyone through shared responsibility. A small cloth wiped across a wooden bowl, a carefully folded napkin, a short walk to return serving cups. Each action felt like part of a quiet ritual that kept the living space comfortable. The repetition offered calm, especially for those who found solace in maintaining order. Work aboard the ship fell into gentle patterns as well. Travelers didn't have official duties like the crew, yet many contributed in small, meaningful ways. Some swept the narrow corridors using simple brooms fashioned from bundled fibers. Others stacked crates, moved water barrels, or helped keep the deck clear of loose objects that might slide during rough weather. These contributions weren't assigned. They emerged naturally from the shared desire to make the journey smoother for everyone. On calmer days, a few passengers volunteered to help distribute water. They carried heavy wooden buckets from the storage area, moving slowly to maintain balance as the ship rolled. Their steps were deliberate, their focus steady, and their efforts appreciated by everyone who received a fresh cup. The water itself tasted plain, but it brought relief, especially after long hours in the confined space below. Some travelers repaired items around the bunk area, tightening knots on hammocks, fixing loose planks, or adjusting worn fabric that separated sleeping spaces. These small repairs helped keep the communal environment functional and comfortable. The repetition of mending and adjusting became soothing, a way to focus the mind without straining it. The ship's creaking supported these moments, turning them into quiet, meditative rhythms. Another small anchor: allow your shoulders to soften. Let the weight you might be carrying ease with the same gentleness these passengers found in routine. In the afternoons, after meals, and minor tasks, passengers found themselves with stretches of quiet time. Some used the moments to tend to personal belongings, washing clothes with limited water, hanging damp fabric to dry, or shaking out blankets to remove lingering dust. The process required patience, but the motion offered comfort. Caring for familiar items created a sense of normalcy, a reminder of life beyond the ship. Above deck, a few people joined the crew in light tasks that did not require specialized skill. They lifted small ropes, carried coiled lines, or held items steady while repairs were made. These moments allowed passengers to step into the open air, breathe more freely, and feel useful. The cooperation formed a bridge between crew and traveler, reinforcing a sense of shared purpose. Other passengers preferred quieter work, like sorting dried food portions, arranging supplies, or cleaning the wooden floorboards with damp cloths. These modest contributions created an atmosphere of mutual respect. People worked not because they were obligated, but because contributing made the ship feel a little more like a home suspended above the water. As evening approached, the scent of food returned once more, signaling the close of the day's cycle. Travelers moved with slower steps now, their bodies softened by the long hours and gentle work. The social world that had grown during the voyage expanded through small gestures during mealtime, offering a spare piece of bread, sliding over to make room, helping steady a bowl for someone affected by the ship's sway. And as night slowly wrapped itself around the vessel, the quiet consistency of meals and daily tasks became the soft backbone of life at sea, simple, repetitive, comforting, and steady enough to help everyone rest. As the day moved into its quieter hours, some passengers focused on tasks that helped maintain a sense of routine, folding worn clothes, brushing dust from the corners of the bunk area, or organizing small bundles of personal belongings. These actions weren't rushed. They flowed at the same gentle pace as the ship's steady movement. People found comfort in the predictability of these chores. They didn't demand much thought, allowing the mind to drift peacefully while hands moved with slow familiarity. Even the simple sound of cloth being shaken out or a wooden bucket being set down on the floor blended softly into the ship's calming soundscape. Others dedicated their time to preparing communal spaces. They wiped tables with damp cloths, swept corridors that gathered bits of debris, or ensured the pathways remained clear for those needing to move steadily through the shifting environment. These efforts helped everyone feel more settled, as though the ship's interior could be shaped into a small, floating village cared for by many hands. The knowledge that each person's work brought comfort to others subtly strengthened the sense of community. Even those who rarely spoke felt connected through shared effort. Another gentle anchor for you. Notice if your breath has become softer. Let it continue drifting at whatever pace feels most natural. Some passengers stepped onto the deck to help with simple preparations for the next meal. They carried lightweight crates, washed metal cups using the limited supply of clean water, or organized stacks of bowls to make distribution smoother. The soft clinking of utensils and the rhythmic splashing of water against metal added a soothing texture to the air. These tasks may have been repetitive, but repetition itself created a calm structure, something that travelers had begun to rely on amid the long, drifting days of the voyage. In another corner, a group of passengers worked together to sort dried foods stored in tightly sealed sacks. They separated grains, checked for spoilage, and measured small portions for upcoming meals. Their hands moved slowly, brushing softly against the materials, creating a quiet rustling that blended with the ship's creaks. They spoke only when necessary, choosing instead to let the work speak through steady, coordinated motion. The rhythm of sorting brought a kind of mental ease, giving them purpose without strain. Below deck, children helped in small ways, folding cloths, carrying lightweight items, or handing parents small tools when needed. Their enthusiasm added gentle energy to the dim space, and their presence made even tedious chores feel lighter. Parents guided them with patience, grateful for the chance to teach simple tasks that kept the young ones engaged. The shared effort reinforced the sense of belonging, as though everyone, regardless of age, played a part in keeping their temporary world running smoothly. Another soft reminder: let your jaw rest. Loosen the muscles around your eyes. The story will carry you gently, with or without full attention. As the light shifted into late afternoon, passengers took a moment to observe their progress. They looked around the cleaned and organized space, recognizing the quiet cooperation that shaped it. Small improvements, freshly swept corners, neatly stacked bowls, blankets folded into tidy squares, added an understated comfort. The ship might have been old, worn, and constantly in motion, but through collective effort, it felt more welcoming than it had in the early days of the voyage. A few people returned to the deck to stretch their legs or rinse their hands in a small basin of cool seawater. The breeze carried a clean scent, brushing away the heaviness of indoor air. Watching the horizon again after hours of work brought a refreshing balance to the day. The sea rippled gently, touched by soft sunlight, and the ship's movement lulled the senses into a deeper calm. It was a small reward, a breath of open space after the close, dim work below. Inside once more, passengers settled into a peaceful rhythm. With most tasks completed, they allowed themselves to sit quietly, hands resting, minds wandering gently. Some leaned back against wooden posts, closing their eyes as the ship rocked steadily beneath them. Others shared a few final words with those nearby before falling into comfortable silence. The atmosphere felt warm, grounded, and softened by shared effort. By the time evening approached and the scent of warm food returned, the ship's community felt woven together through countless small gestures. Every task, every shared moment, contributed to a sense of calm continuity. And as travelers gathered once more to eat, the day's work faded into a quiet satisfaction, steady, humble, and restful, carrying them softly toward the night. For many passengers, the ocean became a quiet companion, vast, steady, and endlessly shifting in soft, hypnotic rhythms. When they stepped onto the deck, the first thing they noticed was the gentle shimmer of light scattered across the water, moving in patterns that seemed almost alive. The horizon stretched in every direction, forming a calm, uninterrupted line that soothed the eyes. Passengers leaned on the railing, letting their bodies settle into the slow sway of the ship as they watched the water ripple beneath them. The ocean offered something the crowded quarters below could not: a sense of open space, a chance for breath to flow more freely, and a subtle reminder of how wide the world truly was. Some travelers found themselves drawn to the smallest movements on the water's surface: a thin line of foam trailing behind the ship, a shifting patch where sunlight struck at a different angle, a distant bird gliding effortlessly above the waves, wings outstretched, disappearing and reappearing in the rolling swell. These details held a simple magic, a kind of quiet fascination that asked for nothing and soothed the mind. People stood shoulder to shoulder without speaking, their focus fixed on the subtle motions that played across the sea. The quiet observation created its own calm, as though everyone shared a gentle, wordless meditation. Below deck, those who stayed behind sometimes imagined the view above. They could feel the brightness filtering through the cracks, a soft reminder of the open world just beyond the wooden walls. The rhythmic movement of the ship, paired with the faint scent of sea air drifting downward, allowed them to picture the glistening water without needing to see it directly. This small act of imagination brought its own comfort, a peaceful mental escape into a space where waves rolled endlessly and the sky touched the sea with soft, fluid lines. A gentle anchor for you. If you feel your mind beginning to sway with these images, let it. The ocean's pace welcomes drifting thoughts. On the deck above, the soundscape added to the tranquility. The water lapped against the sides of the hull in soft, repetitive patterns, like a quiet heartbeat echoing through the ship. The breeze whispered against the ropes, creating faint hums that rose and fell as the wind shifted. These natural sounds wove together with the ship's gentle creaking, forming a soothing chorus that wrapped the passengers in calm. The longer they listened, the easier it became for their minds to loosen, to drift, to wander in peaceful spirals. Some passengers closed their eyes as they leaned against the railing, choosing to feel the ocean instead of watching it. They sensed the rise and fall of the ship, the coolness of the wind across their faces, and the sun warming the backs of their hands. The sensation of standing there, held by the motion of the water and the wind, gave them a restful stillness. Even those who had earlier battled seasickness now found moments of equilibrium, as though their bodies had learned to move in quiet partnership with the waves. In small groups or pairs, travelers shared soft conversations about the ocean's moods. They pointed out how the color shifted from pale silver to deep blue, how the waves changed depending on the wind's direction, or how clouds reflected across the surface. These gentle observations created connection without effort. People didn't need to know one another's full stories to share the beauty unfolding before them. The view offered a shared language, simple, calming, and universal. Others preferred silence, choosing to watch the slow arcs of distant swells as though time itself had slowed. Their breathing deepened, tension melted from their shoulders, and thoughts slipped into a restful drift. The ocean didn't ask them to analyze or respond. It simply offered motion, space, and quiet depth. It became a living lullaby, whispered through light, shadow, and endless horizon. Another soft reminder: let your breath rise and fall like a gentle wave. It doesn't need to be controlled or perfected. Just allow it. Passengers who stood on the deck long enough began to notice the subtle rhythm between their own heartbeat and the slow pulse of the sea. This harmony offered a rare sense of grounding. Even far from land, surrounded by miles of water, they felt supported, held by the balance between body and ocean. With every passing moment, the view drew them further into a meditative calm, a state where worry softened and thoughts dissolved into the blue expanse stretching out before them. As the hours drifted by, the passengers settled into a gentle rhythm of simply watching the water move. Some rested their elbows on a railing, letting their fingers hover just above the spray as the ship cut its path through the waves. The foam trailed behind in a long, delicate ribbon, stretching back toward a horizon that slowly softened in color. Travelers found themselves breathing deeper as they observed the seamless blend of sky and sea. The openness offered a kind of emotional release, an invitation to let tension fall away, just as the waves dissolved one after another into calm repetition. Below deck, those who preferred quiet found comfort in imagining the ocean beyond the walls. The ship's rocking echoed through the wooden beams, giving the mind enough clues to paint its own picture. Some pictured rolling swells illuminated by soft sunlight, while others imagined darker, more mysterious depths. However different their internal images were, all carried the same soothing pull. The ocean became a shared mental refuge, something vast yet calming. The knowledge that the Almighty guided all forces, including the movement of the sea, brought reassurance that the journey, though wide and unpredictable, rested within a greater order. Another gentle anchor for you: let your breath flow without direction, rising and settling at its own pace. On the upper deck, a few passengers leaned against stored crates or coiled ropes, letting the breeze wrap around them. The wind played with loose strands of hair and brushed softly across fabric, creating a delicate coolness that refreshed the senses. Even those who rarely spoke found themselves drawn to the open air, content to sit side by side in silence. Sometimes a simple gesture, a slight nod toward an interesting cloud formation or a bird swooping low, was enough to create a brief connection. Words weren't needed when the sea provided its own quiet conversation. As the afternoon deepened, the light shifted once more. The sun angled lower, painting the water in warm shades of gold and amber. Travelers watched how each wave caught the fading light differently, sometimes sparkling brightly, sometimes darkening into gentle shadows. The changing colors felt like a slow-moving painting that evolved at the pace of breath. These long, unbroken moments offered a rare opportunity for reflection. Memories, hopes, and quiet thoughts drifted in and out without pressure, matching the ocean's gentle rhythm. Another soft reminder: if your thoughts scatter like the light on the water, let them. Soft scattering is part of resting. Inside the ship, the air grew warmer as lanterns were prepared for the evening. Passengers returning from the deck brought with them a faint scent of sea breeze, mixing with the comforting glow forming in the lower space. People settled into comfortable positions, some leaning back against wooden beams, others lying across their bunks with hands resting loosely on their stomachs. Their bodies had grown accustomed to the sway of the ship, and now the motion served as a natural lullaby. The quiet hum of earlier conversations faded into gentle silence. By the time the last traces of daylight slipped beneath the horizon, the social spaces above and below deck had softened into peaceful stillness. The sea, now darker and calmer, mirrored the quiet mood of the passengers. With the ocean stretching endlessly into the night, travelers felt held, not only by the vessel, but by the sense of calm that comes from watching something vast and serene. Their eyelids grew heavier, their thoughts quieter, and the soft sounds of water against the hull lulled them into deeper rest. The ocean had become more than scenery. It had become a blanket of calm, comforting them through the long night ahead. When night settled over the Atlantic, it didn't arrive suddenly. It unfolded slowly, like a soft curtain lowering across the sky. The final traces of sunlight stretched thin along the horizon before melting into shades of indigo. Passengers gathered on the dim deck or retreated to the quiet below, moving with gentler steps as the world around them darkened. The air cooled, carrying a crispness that brushed softly across their cheeks. With lanterns glowing faintly, The ship became a floating island of warm light surrounded by endless darkness. The vastness of the night sea didn't frighten most travelers. Instead, it invited a quieter state of mind, one where thoughts slowed and senses softened. For those who lingered above, the sky offered a view unlike anything they had known on land. Stars scattered across the darkness in numbers too many to count, shimmering like distant embers. The ship creaked softly, and the waves whispered against the hull, creating a calm duet that filled the air with gentle rhythm. Passengers tilted their heads upward, letting the quiet beauty wrap around them. In the stillness, the ocean felt less like a barrier and more like a peaceful expanse connecting earth to sky. Watching the stars helped dissolve worries, encouraging the mind to drift peacefully outward. Below deck, the lantern light created pockets of warm glow that contrasted softly with the shadows. People arranged their blankets, adjusting them carefully to create comfort despite the narrow bunks. Some whispered to companions beside them. Others simply breathed in sync with the ship's sway. The wooden beams overhead groaned occasionally, not in warning but in conversation with the waves outside. These familiar sounds became nighttime companions, steady, predictable, soothing. The ship felt like a cradle, rocking its passengers with gentle consistency through the unfolding hour. Another soft anchor for you. Let your thoughts move slowly, like the dimming light across the water. As travelers prepared for rest, the hum of the day softened into near silence. Footsteps became quieter, conversations faded into murmurs, and the atmosphere thickened with calm. Children curled beneath blankets, comforted by the steady presence of parents nearby. Older passengers sat with bowed heads for a moment longer, collecting their thoughts before lying down. This transition from wakefulness to rest was unhurried, shaped by natural cues: the dark sky, the quiet deck, the soft rocking beneath them. Some passengers felt drawn back to the deck even after settling below, craving one last look at the moonlit water. The moon cast a silver path across the waves, forming a shimmering trail that seemed to lead impossibly far. Standing in its glow felt like stepping into a dream. Even those who rarely spoke found themselves whispering half-formed thoughts, softened by the hush of the night. The cool air refreshed them, and the quiet scene invited deep reflection without stirring worry. Inside, the air grew warmer as bodies settled into their bunks, their breath mingling softly in the small space. A few whispered stories passed between companions, nothing dramatic, just memories of distant places or spoken hopes for gentler days ahead. These whispers weren't meant to entertain but to comfort, to create a sense of closeness before sleep. As voices faded, the ship's rhythmic creaking filled the room again, creating a soft, steady blanket of sound. Another reminder: if your breathing naturally lengthens here, let it. You are syncing with the same rhythm that lulled these travelers to rest. As night deepened, the boundary between the ship and the sea began to blur. The steady rocking felt like the ocean's own pulse, lifting and lowering with patient consistency. Passengers who remained awake for a while longer found themselves slipping into a meditative state, their thoughts drifting gently like floating pieces of wood carried by the tide. The darkness brought a sense of closeness. Inside the ship, people rested in quiet companionship. Outside, the sea held them with vast, calm presence. By the time the lanterns dimmed even further, sleep had begun settling across the ship like a soft fog. Breathing slowed. Movement stilled. The gentle rise and fall of the vessel became the final lullaby of the night. The Atlantic, calm and expansive, wrapped itself around the ship with quiet patience. And travelers, worn from the day yet soothed by the night's embrace, drifted slowly toward rest. As the deepest part of the night settled in, the ship moved with an almost imperceptible rhythm, gentle, slow, like a long exhale spread across the water. Passengers who were still awake felt the softness of this hour wrap around them. The darkness no longer felt vast or intimidating. It felt protective, as though the sea had drawn a quiet circle around the ship to shelter it until morning. The soundscape shifted into its calmest form, a muted splash here, a faint creak there, each sound spaced far apart like slow, steady breaths. Those lying in their bunks let the stillness seep into their muscles, relaxing the last threads of tension lingering from the day. Above deck, a handful of travelers sat together in silence, their silhouettes outlined faintly by the moon. They didn't speak, not out of restraint, but because the night seemed to hold its own conversation. The breeze whispered softly between ropes, and the ship glided through water that shimmered under the pale light. These passengers watched the stars drift slowly overhead, tracing constellations they recognized and others they didn't. The quiet beauty of the night sky felt grounding, reminding them that even in unfamiliar places, the heavens remained steady. Their thoughts eased into gentle reflections, the kind that carried no urgency. Another small anchor for you. Imagine the night air brushing softly across your face, bringing calm with each breath. Below deck, the sleeping quarters breathed with a slow, collective rhythm. People shifted occasionally in their bunks, but the movements were soft, barely disturbing the calm. A few murmured in their sleep, their voices blending with the ship's faint sounds. The interplay of warm lantern light and drifting shadows created a cocoon-like atmosphere. Even passengers who struggled with rest on earlier nights found themselves easing into sleep more easily, rocked gently by the predictable movement beneath them. The stillness nourished them, offering the kind of deep rest only quiet hours could provide. Farther down the corridor, an older traveler remained awake, sitting upright with a blanket drawn around their shoulders. They watched the lantern glow sway slightly as the ship moved. Their eyes traced the gentle dance of shadows, and the motion brought a familiar comfort. They weren't restless, simply not ready to close their eyes yet. This peaceful waking state felt just as restful as sleep. The stillness of the night gave them space to think softly, to remember moments from home, to breathe without effort. Soon enough, their eyelids would grow heavy, guided by the calm around them. Another gentle reminder: allow your breath to fall into its easiest rhythm. Nothing needs to be held tightly here. Near the far end of the sleeping area, a small group whispered a final exchange before drifting off. Their voices were barely audible, just soft threads weaving through the quiet. They spoke about the calmness of the sea, the stars they had seen earlier, and their hopes for better weather in the morning. These simple conversations, carried out in the hush of night, created a warm sense of companionship. When the whispers faded, the silence felt richer, as though it held their shared thoughts within it. Outside, the ship continued its slow passage across the water. The moonlight shifted with the waves, casting delicate lines across the deck. The ocean, stirred only by the gentle movement of currents, embraced the ship with vast patience. The night felt long, but in a comforting way, stretching gently, giving travelers the time to fully rest, fully breathe, fully let go of whatever weight they carried. As the final hours before dawn unfolded, the entire vessel seemed wrapped in a deep, restful peace. The rocking grew even softer, the sounds quieter, as if the sea itself understood the need for stillness. Travelers drifted between dreams and waking moments, held in a space where time felt slow, warm, and safe. And as night lingered in its last stretch, the ship floated on, steady, calm, and carrying its sleeping passengers gently toward a new day. Morning arrived gently, with a faint glow spreading across the horizon, signaling the slow approach of a new day and something more. Passengers stirred in their bunks, sensing a subtle shift in the ship's pace. The rocking felt slightly different, the air carried a hint of unfamiliar scent, and the distant cries of seabirds floated in from beyond the open water. These small clues, almost imperceptible, hinted that land was drawing near. Travelers rose quietly, rubbing sleep from their eyes as the soft morning light trickled through the wooden slats. The gentle awareness that their journey was entering a new phase brought a tender mixture of curiosity and calm anticipation. Some passengers made their way to the deck, moving with steady steps as they adjusted to the morning sway. When they reached the open air, they found the horizon washed in pale gold. A thin line, just barely visible, separated sea from land. It wasn't clear yet what shape it held, but its presence alone stirred a quiet ripple through those who saw it. People gathered along the railing without speaking, their breath caught in soft release. The long weeks at sea, filled with routines, storms, meals, and quiet nights, now pointed toward this distant outline. Even from afar, it felt like a gentle promise forming on the edge of their vision. Below deck, those still waking heard murmurs drifting in from a stairwell. No urgency, just soft voices carrying tentative excitement. Some sat up and instinctively smoothed their blankets, a subtle preparation for the moment ahead. Others stretched slowly, grounding themselves before joining the quiet movement upward. The ship itself seemed to respond to the approaching land. Its rhythm felt firmer, more directional, as though guided by a new certainty. Though the passengers couldn't see the ocean around them from below, they sensed the shift, a quiet tightening of focus within the vessel's wooden frame. A gentle anchor for you. If you feel a soft lift in your chest, let it settle slowly. This is a calm turning point, not a rush. When more passengers reached the deck, they found the early morning air cooler and fresher than before. The wind carried hints of vegetation, subtle, almost imagined, but enough to make their senses perk. People leaned closer to the railing. Eyes narrowed as they tried to distinguish shapes in the distance. Some thought they saw hills. Others suggested clusters of trees. Regardless of the accuracy, the simple act of imagining land brought warmth to their expressions. They had been surrounded by endless water for so long that even the faintest suggestion of earth felt grounding. Small groups formed naturally, their quiet conversations wrapped in wonder rather than excitement. They spoke about what the land might look like up close, how long it would take to reach shore, and what their first steps might feel like after weeks on a moving deck. No one speculated loudly or boldly. Their voices remained soft, shaped by the calm atmosphere that had defined their journey. Hope appeared gently, not as a burst of energy but as a warm presence settling into the chest. Inside the ship, children grew animated at the whispers of land. Their eyes lit with curiosity as they tried to peek through cracks in the boards or asked parents if they could go up to see. Parents guided them patiently, reminding them to move carefully on the deck. For the young ones, this moment felt magical, a shift from endless water to the idea of a place where the ship would finally stop rocking. Their excitement brought subtle liveliness to the otherwise quiet morning. Another gentle reminder, if your thoughts drift toward what arrival means in your own life, allow them to float softly without direction. Passengers who had grown accustomed to the sea's vast quiet felt a mixture of comfort and uncertainty. The approaching shore meant change, new routines, unfamiliar surroundings, and unknown challenges. Yet, there was no fear in their expressions, only a calm readiness. They had endured the ocean's rhythms together, learned to live in close quarters, shared stories and silence, and found strength in one another's presence. This shared resilience made the idea of stepping onto new land feel manageable, even welcome. As the ship continued forward, the outline of the distant coast grew gradually clearer. The sun rose higher, turning the water into a shimmering field of gold. The light illuminated their faces as they watched, making the scene feel dreamlike, soft, warm, almost surreal. Each wave that carried them closer felt like part of a gentle procession, guiding them toward the end of one chapter and the quiet beginning of another. As the ship drew closer to the coastline, details slowly emerged from what had once been only a faint outline. Hills appeared as softened silhouettes, and clusters of trees gathered like gentle brushstrokes on a distant canvas. Passengers leaned forward slightly, drawn by the quiet excitement of recognition. Land no longer felt like something imagined. It had weight, shape, and color. The horizon that once stretched endlessly now held a destination, and this simple truth settled warmly into everyone's chest. They didn't cheer loudly or rush. This was a moment meant for quiet appreciation. Below deck, the soft rustle of travelers preparing for arrival drifted through the narrow space. People folded blankets neatly, tied their bundles securely, and checked the few belongings they carried. Each action held meaning, preparation for the next step, a final acknowledgement of the journey behind them. The ship creaked gently as its pace slowed, responding to changes in current and depth. Even without seeing the water, passengers felt the shift. The long rhythm that had shaped their days at sea was easing, preparing them for the unfamiliar stillness of solid ground. Another gentle anchor. Allow your breath to steady itself. Change does not require urgency, only presence. When passengers returned to the deck, the coastline was close enough that they could make out colors. The muted greens of vegetation, the sandy tone of the shoreline, the soft brown of distant structures. They watched in thoughtful silence, absorbing the sight with a mixture of hope and calm reflection. The air carried a faint new scent, filled with traces of earth and plant life. For many, it was the first reminder in weeks of soil, roots, and stillness. These sensations wove themselves quietly into the moment, grounding their thoughts. Children pointed with wide eyes, whispering excitedly as parents stared at them. Their joy added a touch of softness to the scene, lifting the mood without disrupting its calm. Adults, many of whom had appeared weary throughout the voyage, found gentle smiles forming as they watched the coastline come into focus. The journey's hardships felt distant now, softened by the nearness of land and the promise of rest. Inside the ship, a few travelers paused to take one last breath of the familiar wooden scent, listening to the gentle echoes that had been their nightly companions. The creaking beams and soft groans of the hull had become part of their daily rhythm, as recognizable as footsteps or quiet conversation. Letting go of this floating world carried its own tenderness. These reflections lingered briefly before dissolving into the steady anticipation of what lay ahead. Another reminder: if memories or reflections rise in your mind here, let them drift gently. Arrival is as much about looking back as it is about moving forward. As the vessel glided through its final stretch, the atmosphere thickened with peaceful acceptance. Land approached steadily, not with urgency, but with patient assurance. Passengers stood close together, sharing the silence as their eyes followed the coastline's slow expansion. They had crossed a vast distance, held by the guidance of the Almighty through waves, wind, and weather. Now the journey's rhythm softened, preparing them for a new beginning shaped by stillness rather than movement. When the first sounds of the shallow waters reached their ears, gentle laps instead of deep ocean swells, passengers inhaled deeply. The sound felt intimate, welcoming, like the first page of a new chapter opening quietly before them. The ship would soon stop, and feet that had grown used to shifting floors would meet unmoving ground. Yet the moment was not marked by excitement. It was wrapped in calm gratitude. And as the ship eased closer to the shore, a gentle understanding settled across the travelers. This voyage had shaped them, softened them, and carried them towards something quietly hopeful. Thank you for listening to this gentle story tonight. May its calm moments stay with you, easing your mind and guiding you toward rest. Wherever your thoughts drift, I hope this quiet journey brings you peace.